Welcome to Growing Startups, where we talk to growth leaders and marketing professionals about how to drive sustainable growth from the ground up. I'm your host, Evelyn Cools, and I lead marketing for tech startups. I'm excited to share these candid conversations about marketing, culture, collaboration, and everything else that makes startups grow. Today we're joined by Sarah Kuntsal. I hope I said that correctly. Your last name. You can say it again when you introduce yourself. But really excited about this conversation because you have for one, just super interesting background. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that. From aerospace engineer to startup marketer. And you're currently head of product marketing at the social impact platform Groundswell. So before we get into it, Sarah, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and add any color to what I just said.
Sure. Yeah, that about sums it up. I was an aerospace engineer out of school and worked for a few years in the engineering space and just needed something a little more creative in my life. So ended up going back to business school and then working at an agency for a couple years and going client side and startups, and it's been quite an adventure over the last couple years. Fun though, fun adventure.
Yeah. So, and when you say creative, what was it exactly that drew you to marketing? Like, obviously, there's a lot of different types of marketing, but what were you really looking to do that was different from the aerospace engineering?
Sure. Yeah, it was funny. So when I went to business school, I love numbers and data and science. That's how I ended up as an engineer. And I was drawn to all of these finance classes. So I actually have a degree in finance that I don't use. But when I got out, I was trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do? And it was right when social media was becoming a thing for brands. Brands were brand new, like Facebook was new, nobody knew what they were doing. And I ran across this agency that they had done a lot of online marketing and they were getting into the strategy side of social media. And I was just like, I loved it. I was like, ooh, how do we take brands from the brick and mortar? How do we get them into social media? How do we get the fans there? What do we do? And so that's what really drew me in, because it was this challenge of, we have a brand new medium that no one really knows what's going to happen there. And we have a whole bunch of companies that have been doing, the same thing for a long time and kind of squishing them together. And it was really fun. So in the beginning, I mean, we worked on brands like BB, the clothing company, like Williams Sonoma, Mazda, and kind of figuring out, like, what social platforms should they be on? What should they do? What should their strategy look like? How does that tie into their store? And it was just really fun. It was a lot of problem solving that had to do with kind of bridging that offline and online gap.
Very cool. I think you really got in at that time when brands were starting to like figure out, oh, Facebook is not just for like teenagers.
Yeah, it was
And
so BB was one of our first clients, and it was so funny because literally, like, they had a Facebook page and it was someone that had worked there. It was like her profile picture and her name, like everything was set up incorrectly, and we were just like, okay, let's take a step back and like think. So it was literally like the very beginning of all of that for the brands.
that's pretty cool. And then you found your way into tech, so I'm excited to talk about that part a little more. But before we get into the full-on marketing chat, I like to start these episodes with a favorite wellness practice or ritual, because we all need a little bit of Zen in our lives as startup marketers.
Me
So,
too.
is there something you do that kind of keeps you grounded and functioning well?
Yeah, I think it sounds so cliche, but I downloaded one of those meditation apps last year or so. It's called Balance. And I had tried all of the big ones before and just didn't get into them. And for some reason, like, this one just sort of sucked me in. I think because they're like shorter meditation, like a lot of them you start with 5 minutes and then it's like 20 minutes. And like, I just start falling asleep at 15 minutes. And so I've loved this app because it has a ton of like 2 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute meditations, and it walks you through like this foundation series. So I try to get in like a 5 or 10 minute meditation each day, but I like, at the end of it, I can feel like my heart rate came down, like I'm a little more calm. I try to do it in the mornings, like right when I sit down at my desk. But I think that's something that's like really helps me just kind of mellow out at the beginning of the day rather than like, oh, I have a meeting, I'm excited. It's just like, okay, take a deep breath, for 5 minutes and then go on your day.
I need to start doing that more too. I feel like everyone just talks about, how good meditation is, or even just like breathing, like you were
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
just like simple breath work.
Yeah.
And you like know it's good for you, but then actually doing it is a different thing. So
I'm
it's a good
always like 5 minutes.
reminder.
Yeah, like I can take 5 minutes. Let's do it.
Okay, yeah, that's a good thing for me to remember going into going into another workday.
Yeah.
So yeah, want to take it back a little bit to just like the beginning when you went from aerospace engineering to product marketing, and that's a pretty non-traditional background, and I can kind of relate to that because I came from the audio engineering and music world, and actually started with like 1 year studying marketing in college and thought it wasn't for me, and then went on this entire other path, and now I'm back at marketing. But I feel like there's this, I don't know, I don't meet a lot of people with a non-traditional background, so I guess I'm curious how you feel like that has actually been like a strength for you and maybe also difficult sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. I think the one thing that's really good is that you come at problems from a different angle. Like you didn't learn the basics like a lot of people did. So there's a good and a bad there because sometimes I come in and like I have a very problem solving mind. Like that was my favorite part of engineering was having a problem and solving it. And so I think you come at problems from a different way and you don't necessarily try to fit it into like a marketing box. Like I'm like, well, maybe we should do something over here that has nothing to do with what you would traditionally do in marketing. And so I think you just have like a bigger picture and a bigger sort of bag of tricks to pull from because you're not like, okay, what did I learn in school? I have to follow. And I do think, that can sometimes be a downside. More of like sometimes I'm like, do I really know marketing? Like I didn't study this. Like there's people that are like, oh, the 5 Ps or 7 Ps or whatever we're at. And I'm like, let me go Google that for you. Like everyone loves an acronym. I don't know them all. Um, but I think in general, like I love to learn. I'm always trying to learn things. And so for me, it's like, okay, cool. Like now we're getting into like whatever outbound marketing or whatever it might be, like LinkedIn ad targeting. And it's like, here's a new thing to learn. I'm going to go learn as much as I can about it, and just kind of come into it with that like fresh perspective rather than like, this is going to be exactly like, traditional marketing. So I think it's come in handy just because I come up with some wacky ideas sometimes.
I could definitely relate to that. And I think I actually felt the same about this when I was doing music. Like my dad actually thought he thought told me that I could like get a vocal coach if I wanted. I could like, take it a lot more seriously. And I always, even from a young age, thought that it would kind of change my like original voice,
Yeah.
or like, I don't know, I thought I would like learn things that would make me sound like other people. And
Yeah.
later on getting into like songwriting and stuff, it was kind of the same thing where I learned it all myself, and I met all these people who had gone to Berkeley and who had done like 4 years of college studying, jazz theory.
Sure.
And I actually, a lot of them told me that they felt limited or like boxed in by what they thought they should be doing, like
Sure.
how a song should be structured.
Mhm.
And I feel like a lot of the times that's similar to marketing is like, okay, we have all these things that we think we should be doing,
For
but
sure.
it's hard to like pull yourself out of it, if you're so, you have that all studied in your brain for so
Yeah.
long.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And it's also a very intuitive thing. I know that we've talked about that before, but yeah, anything that you want to add on like that side of the intuitive side of marketing?
Yeah, I do feel like there's just sort of like a gut feeling sometimes. It's important to do the research and, make sure you know your customer, make sure you know your competitors, but there's some sort of like just like a gut instinct that like pulls you along and you're like and maybe not of like let's throw all our money here, but like this is the direction we should dig into further. I think that's kind of where you use it is like, here's a couple different brand messages we can use. I feel like this one's going to land. Like, let's go test it and see. And so, kind of using that as like an internal compass to like take you down the path, rather than just saying like, "Oh, we're just going to run with this because I know I'm right." But I do feel like there's something. I don't know, something that like I'll just see ads and I'm like, ooh, that one did not land well. Like I don't know who came up with this, but like that's not going to reach the target audience. And I feel like sometimes you just see an ad and you're like, oh, that's a great ad, or that's like some great marketing material. And I feel like those are the ones that like really, I don't know, came from the gut and kind of had that instinct behind
Mm.
them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think this kind of goes into as well, at least for me, sometimes finding it hard to explain why we're testing things to begin with. Like obviously we'll measure it and see if it's worth pursuing longer, but sometimes it's you have all this like background knowledge of things that you know work, like you understand your target audience, you've maybe done webinars or written case studies, or you just have all this like internal knowledge that you then use to suggest something because like your gut feeling tells you it's right.
Yeah.
But you can't necessarily pinpoint, like if your boss asks you, okay, why are we doing this? It's sometimes really hard to explain,
Yeah.
like from a pure facts perspective, before you've actually tested it. So I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but I feel like that can sometimes be a little tough.
Definitely, definitely tough. And I've also been in the situation where like somebody asks for something and you just know in your gut like that's not a good idea. And so like
Hmm.
you're kind of like, I know this won't work, but I need to like show you it won't work. And I need to find the evidence that's like, maybe we should go this way, or and at least like you just kind of know that like this isn't gonna work. I'm not gonna put all my time here. And maybe it's just about finding like how do you illustrate that that's not the greatest idea, and here's something that's like a better way to use our time and budget.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, marketing is one of those things that everyone has like ideas around or opinions about. So
Yes.
you get a lot of ideas thrown at you, and you're like, okay, well, thank you. Like, I really appreciate it. Sometimes they're great ideas. I love when like other departments come up with ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, like weeding it out and then responding in a way that like is nice. And yeah, kind of explaining that gut feeling thing is kind of difficult sometimes.
Yes.
But kind of on that topic of, working cross departmentally, you're in product marketing. I feel
Mhm.
like that, of all the different types of marketing, really touches like all the other departments maybe the most closely, like
Definitely.
customer success, product, even, sales. So how do you collaborate with those departments? And is there anything that you can, I don't know, suggest on like improving collaboration or making sure that everyone's synced up on what we're doing?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely, and it's a little different. So I'm at a startup where there's sort of, not a huge team on each of those teams, but I think
Yeah.
when I was getting into product marketing, I did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people as well. And this is definitely the same across kind of no matter where you are, what size. But I think product marketing is really sort of that glue that holds together like the product marketing and customer success sales team. It's like a triangle or square.
Right.
Um, but the product marketing team is really all about the voice of the customer. So like the customer, you work with sales to make sure that they're selling a story that the customer wants to hear. You work with customer support to hear what the customer's saying, like what are they focused on, what are they having trouble with, what do we need to create material around, and then working with product to see, what's coming out and how do we market that, and also like are we building things that the customer actually wants to see and use. And I think the biggest part around that is just like constant communication. So whether it's, having weekly product marketing meetings where you bring everyone together, and that's what we do now. We have I think it's a bi-weekly meeting, and we bring all those teams together and say, what's coming out from product soon? What are customers talking about? Do we have any customer implementations we need to know about? And just making sure that everyone's on the same calendar. Because I think when you don't have that, there's a lot of other meetings that happen, and like timelines might come up in one, but maybe customer service isn't in that meeting, or whatever it might be. And so this is just that one meeting that's like, here's our timeline, here's what's coming up, what do we need, what do we have that we don't need. And I think just staying up to date, whether it's Notion pages or calendars. But I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned is in Slack channels too, just making sure like, hey, how did that launch go, or how's this going? Because the minute you sort of stop communicating, everyone just kind of wanders back to their own little silos, and you really
Hmm.
things can slip by really easily. So being the one that kind of like pulls everyone together and says, "Hey, let's all stay on the same schedule. What's new, what's not." Even if it doesn't seem like there's a lot happening, it's like a really great meeting to just get together because there's always something that you're like, "Oh, I forgot about that," or "I didn't know all the customers were having issues with this. Like, what can we do?" And just having that ongoing cadence.
Like you said, sometimes it feels like there might not be that much going on, but then if you skip over those kind of meetings for
Yep.
too long, it becomes kind of a disaster and people are completely disconnected. So,
Totally. Totally.
yeah, it's interesting because I do feel like um, my role as a marketer a lot of the times is also that like glue or trying to
Mhm.
get these departments to talk together because like I need information from all of them
Yep.
sometimes more than they need information from each other. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. So you said you focus obviously on voice of the customer. That's like your main thing. I'm really curious. I'm currently working on a case study, and I feel like I love case studies. I love when marketing gets to talk to customers one on one and really like dig into the story of why they love our product and what things we were able to accomplish with them. So I'm guessing that's some of the things you do, you
Mhm.
focus on a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Case studies have always been big. And I think, it's just sort of a way of proving that you can do the thing you're saying you can do, right? Like everyone's website says they're amazing and they're the number one in the industry and they're revolutionary and next gen, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. But like, how do you trust who really is doing that and who's just saying that? And so for me, like a case study is just so helpful because you're like, oh, here's a client who A is willing to talk about it because that's like a big thing. Like a lot of clients don't want to talk about it or they're not that happy. So they're willing to talk about, your work and you're able to show like the work that you've done, hopefully with numbers. Numbers are always great.
Oh.
And I think that's one thing that we learned the hard way at my previous startup. But like you got to get those like benchmark numbers in the beginning. So like make sure you know where did we start so that you can track where did we end and kind of show the progression. But it's just really great to have a client who wants to talk about you, say something amazing. You have some numbers to show that you did great things. And I've found that that was, especially in like the healthcare space, like there's healthcare people don't like talking about themselves very much, and that not all the
Mm.
companies can even come out and say. And so anytime you can get someone to talk, like we would jump on it and be like, yes, let's make a case study. And those just mean so much in the space, most industries, I think, being able to see that like you've done the real work, it worked well, and someone was excited to talk about it. So it's almost like it's like a trophy on your wall that you're able to brag about.
Yeah, I love case studies, but you're so right. I think that's the one thing to take away is a good case study includes data, like ideally in the title.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just something that really, yeah, people like numbers and it makes sense because everything else is just anecdotal and, it's hard to kind of put it in perspective, but numbers are like a hard truth. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
something that I've learned is, even before you think you're gonna write case studies or before you're really focusing on maybe doing a new batch of case studies is really connecting with the customer success team and figuring out like what clients do we want to start tracking benchmarks or what data do we need to be collecting to
For sure.
actually show success for these specific
Yeah.
customers so that you can kind of like start a little bit earlier than just trying to like pull everything together in the moment.
Yeah. And I think also, being very like specific on what you did, especially if it's a little more for like, I guess, marketing consultants or like the marketing agencies. But like sometimes I read a case study and I'm like, what did you do? Like I see results, but like I don't know what you did here. And I think there's a tendency of like, somebody worked in an agency and now they're doing their own thing and they're just slapping all the logos on that they might have worked with, but like they did a very tiny thing. And so like, I want to see a case study. Here's exactly what I did for the client. Here's exactly what the results were. And I think that's what they were made for. But sometimes when they're vague, you're just like, so you were on an email? Like, I don't understand what you did.
Yeah.
And I think it's when you're writing a case study, like it's super important to be clear, like exactly what part you played in that process.
Yeah, it can be very easy to keep it too vague. I feel like that's with marketing messaging in general,
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
can be easy, that it's just like it's so easy to make it vague. And you're listening to the customer, you're interviewing them about this case study, and if you focus too much on just like what they're saying or how they feel, and not actually also adding those details of what you did,
Yeah.
then it just becomes not compelling anymore.
Yeah. Exactly. And you really like you want your future customer to like read that case study and be able to like insert themselves into it as like the
Hmm.
client. So you want them to see how you came in and saved the day. And they should be able to read it and be like, oh, they saved the day for this client. They can do it for me as well.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the healthcare industry. So I actually want to take it back a little bit. I guess in your career, you also had a previous role where you launched a disruptive health tech brand in a traditional market, which I always think is very interesting. It's something that I've been a part of too in a way. I was also health tech, like a
Sure.
virtual healthcare when that really wasn't super popular yet. So
Mm.
I guess, yeah, from what you were working on, maybe just start by talking about what the product was and the industry. And then I'm really curious about, what you learned about like positioning in that kind of space.
Sure. Yeah. So it was very interesting. It's in the NEMT space. It's non-emergency medical transportation. So it's basically like getting people to and from health appointments, doctor's appointments, dialysis, things like that. And the industry has been around for a long time, and it's traditionally been done in a very old school way, like lots of long buses getting people to the hospital, fax machines, things like that. And so we came in and basically brought that Uber model into this industry. So the idea of, you could order, schedule ahead a trip on an app, you could track a car on an app, and also just the fact that you had one car coming to pick you up in the same way that Uber would, rather than getting on this 15 passenger bus that was all going to the same place. And so it was a very different thing in the industry. Like it had never been done before. And we were a California company where everyone else has been around and they're kind of on the East Coast. And, I think what we learned, we went to this big conference. We were like, we're here. We're like all technology. We're going to be great. And we were using terms like logistics, like healthcare logistics. And we go to this conference and all these like very lovely old school healthcare people are like, oh, so you do like package delivery logistics. And we were like, nope. And so we had that question asked like 10 times and we were like, okay, we're going to go back to the drawing board with this. So we kept the name, but we sort of pivoted how we explained it. And it was, more focused on like getting people to and from places. So it was just interesting because we kind of came at it as we're going to bring new, I won't say jargon, but like new terms and kind of describe
Mm.
ourselves in a new way. And very quickly learned that like that doesn't always work. And sometimes you need to stick to the terms that people know and explain how you're different in other ways. So, it really became more about we have experience, our parent company had been doing this for a long time. And so it was really kind of focusing on this positioning of we have all the experience in the space, but we're bringing technology and like a new experience for your end users. And that really landed well. I would say a year after all the competitors were like, we have technology too. And they were all trying to make apps and all that stuff. And so then the challenge was like, how do we show that we have actual technology and we're actually doing things differently and not just saying, you know, my our old sales guy used to say like we would just slap an app on it and that's what everyone else is doing is like slap an app. We're like we're not app slappers, which did not become a catchphrase.
Not app
But the idea
slappers.
was, in these RFPs, like how do we explain that like we're doing this for real? And a lot of it was case studies, right? Like we would say like here's exactly what
Mhm.
we've done, here's what we've built, and really kind of just drawing it out so that people understand why we were different.
App slappers, that's hilarious. I feel like now the equivalent of that is AI slappers.
So true.
Uh,
Like we have AI, and you're like, well, what does it do?
yeah, what does it do? That's super interesting though. So did you go from almost trying to create a new category to trying to fit within a different category, like an existing one, but just differentiating yourself within it?
Yeah, it definitely became, I think especially in like healthcare where it's much more traditional, there's regulations everywhere. And so the idea of like something brand new and different doesn't sit well with in that industry. So it had to become more of like, how are we making an existing thing better? And so it sort of became, we're not creating a new category, we're just like standing out in the existing category in a better way. And I think, it went out to like, what are the terms that people use? What are they familiar with? And how do we just describe it better than we've done in the past?
So you went from like healthcare logistics to like what did you then end up calling it if you had to like say it in a couple words?
It was it was funny because we would go to these conferences and I would sit at the booth, and if you ever get a chance to go to a conference, it's great. You literally get like a test case of hundreds of people coming by and you get
Yep.
to explain your story and you tweak it every time because you're like, that did not land. And so the thing that landed the most was saying Uber for healthcare. And we hated saying it because it was sort of the early days of Uber, but it was still like we hated using our competitor. But the minute we said Uber for healthcare, people were like, oh, we get it. So it wasn't an official tagline, obviously, but that was the one thing that we would say, oh, we do all do this. It's like Uber for healthcare. And then people sort of immediately got what we got, what we were saying. So we still were healthcare logistics, and that was kind of the focus of what we did. But that Uber for healthcare just, it was great until Uber started dipping their toe in it. And then we were kind of not allowed to use it anymore. It's like, we're like Uber, but better in healthcare.
I mean, I don't know. If I was Uber, I'd be kind of stoked that another company was using us as like the thing that people know, you know?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Although, but then Uber, like they started doing healthcare trips, and that's when it was like, okay, now we have to
Oh,
kind of like differentiate
okay.
ourselves a
Yeah,
little
that
bit
makes
more
sense.
differently.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is that, I know that you were at a company that scaled from 12 to 600 employees. Was that the same company?
It was, yes, yes.
Okay, how was that? Because I've never been part of like crazy growth like that. I've always been in like the small early stage companies.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm curious like what that was like for you as like I don't know if you were the solo marketer at the time and then
I was. It was an adventure. I was the solo marketer for a lot of the time. I had a little team at one point. There's not a lot of margin in the healthcare space, and so a lot of the sort of effort is on the operation side. Like our goal was to get people to their appointments, and we couldn't not take people. So marketing was sort of, I won't say left behind, but a little bit left behind. And so, the scaling was interesting. Like a lot of the company, we were very focused on the operation side, lots of like regional offices. The customer success team as well was very big. We had a lot of people on phones. We had a huge like phone force that would handle all these like phone calls for bookings and things like that. So it was, the early days of startups are fun where things are just like a little bit crazy. And I remember one day we were like, oh, this new Slack thing is cool. Let's do Slack. And then we just like signed up for Slack and started using it. And, by the end, like everything has to go through approval processes and IT and approve. And it's, we don't get to just sign up for things. So it was kind of interesting to just see the progression of like becoming a more official company, and having HR and all these different, parts of the company that tell you what to do a little bit. But it was fun. It was fun to see these teams grow and to see things expand. And, the more that we do these implementations, the better that we would get at them. So yeah, it was like two very different companies from when I started to kind of when the company we were purchased by one of our competitors. And that was the end of that.
what's like your where do you thrive the most personally as a marketer? Like do you like the smaller companies or like that 600 employee experience
Yeah,
was
I
also good
definitely
for you?
like the smaller ones. It's funny when we got bought out, they had a marketing team, so they didn't need me. But I was like, I swore off startups. I was like, this is so stressful. And then I landed in another startup. Um, but it's just fun. I think it's fun at this smaller stage where you work with a lot of teams. Like I really enjoyed that. Like you would sit in a meeting with like people from all over in different teams, and you really get to brainstorm on everything from like product to engineering to conference planning to, I don't know, office planning. um, And as it gets larger, you kind of silo off a little bit more and you don't get to be in that group. So I really enjoy like the company that I'm at now is smaller. We have like 25, 30 people, and it's kind of back in that, there's a lot of all hands meetings. There's a lot of meetings that include everyone. You're getting ideas from everywhere. You do wear a lot of hats, but like you also have a lot of support. People are happy to jump in and help. So like the very small under 10 is probably not my favorite because that's where it's a little too crazy. But I feel like, my company now has, some great sort of people focusing on HR and like the people ops side. And I think that really helps. Once you get that like layer that starts thinking about like culture and benefits and things like that, I feel like that's like the sweet spot of like it's still small enough to be, you know, a little bit crazy, but like just big enough to feel like an actual company, where you're not going to be wondering like, where does my paycheck come from? Or like, who do I go to with questions? You kind of have that layer in there.
Yeah, you can definitely feel that difference. And it usually has to do with the amount of employees.
Yes.
And I've definitely been part of both. Like my very beginning in startups was like first full-time hire somewhere. They're still figuring out all of that stuff, especially when it comes to like what culture do we want to build.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a tricky one too, is like it's
For sure.
really make or break if they think that's important
Mhm.
for like how well the company grows as well. Like I think people forget about that sometimes is you don't just need good people to scale a startup, but you also need to think about, at some point, we need that kind of stability a little bit to like decent benefits and, not being scared about where your paycheck comes from, like you're saying. But then also the culture and like how do we collaborate together? So yeah, I'm guessing that that's also something you've seen different different things throughout the years, had
Yeah.
different experiences there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just so helpful when you have, I mean, whoever it is, it doesn't have to be like the head of HR, but like when there's one person who's focused on like, what is the employee experience like here? Like that, I feel like is like that magical role that like changes it from several people just scurrying, trying to make something work to like an atmosphere I actually want to be in and like people are enjoying and someone's buying lunch or planning happy hours, but it's just that kind of like going beyond the just like heads down working to like making it an experience is like a huge leap in startups, and I think that's kind of like the sweet spot. I try to tell people, I'm like, ask them who's in charge of planning things, what do they have for HR, because I think that's something that's like, unless they want to do it, if you want to get in there and do it, like great, but like that's something that's like worth looking at if you're getting into startups.
Yeah, it's really good advice because it differs so much from startup to startup,
For sure.
whether they find those things important and kind of where they are in that, if they've crossed that
Yeah,
that barrier.
totally.
So that's a really good thing to think about if you're, listening and thinking about either going into startups for the first time or you're, looking at just another startup job, like ask these kinds of questions.
For sure.
Yeah. Are there any other questions that you would suggest asking or when you're looking somewhere?
Um, yeah, I think, uh, especially with like the marketing side, I think like, so I talked to maybe like, I don't know, 30 or 40 people in product marketing at companies across the tech space. And it was fascinating because like nobody had the same role. Like everyone had similar responsibilities, but everyone was like, like there's no sort of generic, like this is what product marketing does. And I think, one of the things that makes that very different is depending on like who do they report to? Do they report to someone on marketing or do they report to someone on the product side? And I think, that's a really good question to ask because you tend to get different roles and responsibilities depending on sort of where your focus is. And some people love the very product focused side where you're just focused on sort of everything around that. And some people love the marketing side where you're also helping out with sort of the bigger picture marketing. So kind of understanding like where does that position sit within the organization? Who do they work with? There was some people I talked to that like they never spoke with the marketing team. Like they were just like product all the way and they would kind of like push some things that way, but it wasn't like as much of a partnership. And so I think especially in product marketing, general marketing, it's a little different, but like some of these sort of cross roles, it's just really interesting to see like where do they sit, who do they roll up to, if they have like OKRs or goals, like who do they sit with? Because it'll be very different depending on what team you sit in.
That's a really, really nice, I think, place to kind of close this conversation is kind of taking it back to, product marketing and what to expect, what it's all about, and what to look for. So, yeah, I usually also like to close these podcasts with asking you something that you're excited about, both in your personal and your professional life. So, I'm really curious.
Yeah. Let's see. Personal life, I do kind of love fall. So I'm excited that we're like finally getting into I'm in San Diego, so it's been very hot here. I think I'm excited about the fall holiday season and cooling off a little bit. The tourists have gone home, so that's fun in personal life. I've also been very focused on networking. I've been doing a lot of networking, and I think that's been really nice, like meeting new people. So that's personal as well. Professional, I would say, I'm at this company called Groundswell. It's a startup, but I think we're really starting to get momentum. We landed a huge client yesterday that I can't talk about yet. But so that's really exciting because I feel like it feels like a startup where we're like starting to knock down those dominoes and there's just like a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon. And so being able to be in the middle of it and coming up with random marketing ideas has really been exciting. And it's like it's been really fun to see, and it's a great team. And yeah, I'm excited to kind of see what happens in the next couple of years.
That's awesome. Getting a new big client is always such a good feeling. So
It's very exciting. There's a
very
lot of champagne
very
popping.
excited for you.
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe a potential case study, bringing it
Yeah.
back to
Oh, but
bringing
it'll
it back
definitely be a
full
case study
circle.
for sure.
Yeah. Very cool. And yeah, speaking of networking, last question is just where can people connect with you or find you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Sarah Kuntsal. I'm not as much on the other social channels, although I have been on Threads. Threads has been really fun. So you can find me on Threads if you want to chat, but mainly LinkedIn. That's kind of my B2B hotspot.
Threads. I have not. I literally always see on Instagram those
Yeah,
like things where they're advertising, threads, and like you see
they're
these
pushing it.
half posts, and I'm always curious what they say, but I'm not curious enough to commit to another platform.
Yes, it's been really good. I was a big fan of Twitter. I've been on Twitter since like the very early days because that was like along with social media the hot new thing. But I there's been a lot of changes over there and I haven't loved it. And I feel like Threads a lot of people from Twitter have moved to Threads recently and it's this like very like during the Olympics it was crazy. Everyone was like following Olympians and getting behind the scenes stuff. And the same thing's happening with the Paralympics. And so it's this very like happy, warm place on the internet. I would highly recommend checking it out.
Okay, well, I think you might have convinced me. I'm like very hesitant to add more platforms
I know.
onto my phone, but a happy fuzzy place on the internet sounds like something you don't really find. So maybe I'll have
It's
to
pretty,
commit and check it out.
it's pretty fun.
All right. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this conversation today. And yeah, to anyone listening, we will see you in the next episode. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Evelyn.